Right, Ray. Right, you got some news?
Yeah, I was in touch with an ex POW from Ubon last week, Tom Brown. He's 100 years old in November, and he's extremely well. He's doing okay in the circumstances, and it was very interesting to chat to him. And I was on the phone for at least half an hour talking about haircuts in the camp and shaving and how they went on and so on and so forth. So it was very interesting. But Tom has been very helpful in my research to Ubon, because a story coming from the Thai people in Ubon was there was a lady who had a fruit and veg stall that used to leave fruit out for the prisoners down by the river. And I was a little bit uncertain about this story because the work that the prisoners did was not near the river. So I couldn't fathom out why the Thai people were sort of telling this story. But one day I was talking to Tom, and without prompting him at all, he said that quite often he was sent on working parties down to the river to bring goods across on the ferry from the railway station. And quite often a lady came along with her daughter and left baskets of fruit by the side of the river for the men to take. And so that story verified what I was being told from the Ubon side. So Tom, for 100 years old, his memory is remarkable.
Yeah. It must have been at quite great personal risk to the lady and her daughter, though, do you think, Ray?
Yeah, it was. And another lady who I've interviewed in Ubon, she was a child at the time, and they said the Japanese toured the streets with a loudspeaker of some sort, warning the Thai people not to fraternise with the prisoners, otherwise there would be consequences. So, the risks that they took in contacting them were very high. But it didn't put them off, and as far as I know, nobody was hurt or injured. It was just a threat that wasn't carried out.
How's your book coming on, Ray?
Well, am I allowed to boast a little bit?
Yeah, let's have a look.
Here it is.
Oh, brilliant. Very good.
Now this is a proof copy, and there was one or two minor alterations that had to be made to it, but in doing so, it cocked up the indexing. So I spent most of last week emails going back and forth between me and the publisher getting that right. But I'm now waiting for the second proof to come back, and I'm pretty certain it's going to be okay, and hopefully the book will be available towards the end of next week on Amazon.
Right. Will you let us know?
Yeah.
Let us know when it does.
Have you got any there, Ray? Have you got any there yourself? Because I want to order one, but I like signed.
Yeah, well, I can do that, but the way that Amazon work nowadays, it's what's called print on demand, which means that you go on Amazon, order the book, it gets printed, and it gets delivered all by Amazon. So I don't carry any stocks of books, particularly.
Find one then.
I'm not sure what the process is at the moment for getting author copies of the book.
Yeah, can you get me one? Order one through you if you like. Sign it and I'll pay you for it.
Okay. Yeah.
Please, because I do like them signed.
Yeah. Be pleased to do that.
Yeah. Please, if you can, and then I'll have your book. It's.
Have we got room for it, Ronnie?
Yeah.
Top shelf there.
The trouble is, I did get that book. Pen and Sword sent me that book, 3 weeks ago, and I still haven't read it, because by the time I go to bed, I go straight to sleep.
Yeah.
So I still haven't read the book, because I like them by the side of my bed so I can read them. But it's as I start off reading it, and it's good because he starts off, he's in Shanghai, China, and he's explaining about the Japanese slowly coming across China. And I didn't realize what was going on, but that seems as though the Japanese in Shanghai had an area they were in, the Chinese had another area they were in, and the British had an area they were in. And they didn't go into each other's areas until the Japanese did one of their, what they call them, they call them all the same. When something happens, they say that weren't their fault, that was the Chinese did it.
Yeah.
And then they suddenly went into the Chinese area shooting everything on sight. But that's ever so good because he explains things that we don't usually hear, and he's now gone. The last one I read, he was going through Hong Kong to Singapore, and that was before Singapore fell. So hopefully he'll explain what was going on in Singapore. But he joined the Shanghai volunteers. I didn't even know they had a volunteer group, but he joined the Shanghai volunteers, and it's quite good actually. That's different. It's different because you don't hear nothing about Shanghai, do you?
Mhm.
But I'll have to get it read because they sent it to me to read through and give them a reply, and that's been stuck there. I don't know if Keith has done his yet because he had one. Anyway, Keith, Kevin rather, Kevin, you've been putting things on about Sumatra.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah. It's actually it's like everything else. You're searching for something and you come across something else. And them videos were actually from an Australian museum that put them on. The repatriation from some men from Sumatra getting on the decoder planes. And there was another interesting one from some Australian soldiers who had been evacuated from Timor, but they ended up in Sumatra and then transported to Singapore, and there was some videos. They're quite interesting to see. It's all when you're looking for one thing, you find something else, and that came from. I was just telling Ray, there was
Did you see that one I put on? That was a awkward one. He ended up in Sumatra. He was Sherwood Forester, and he ended up at Padang, and then he went to Medan, and then he's got two other places which I couldn't find. I just couldn't find where they were. So I take it they could be on the Sumatra Railway. Because the commander with him at Medan actually went to Singapore. So he went to Singapore, and there's no ships went to Singapore at that time. So I don't know how he got to Singapore, except that it was, I think that was Java Party 20 odd. They went on the railway and they did stop at Singapore and then go to the railway. So the only thing I could think about was they picked the ones up from Badan and took them with them to the railway. And then he went back on the boat to Singapore. That's the only thing I could think about.
Yeah.
There's
some strange stories. I mean, you think about this, how much the soldiers were getting shipped around. In my dad's company, there was a lieutenant. He made that escape route across Sumatra to Padang. And rather than staying in Padang and getting shifted up to Medina, what you're talking about, he actually got took back to Singapore and he ended up in Changi. But why? I don't know. It's really odd how they shifted him around.
Yeah, that's another one I've got, and I've just done the Roll of Honour, and he actually was on Bangor Island.
Yeah.
But I don't know how he got there, but he was an Argyle off Plymouth Argyles, aren't they?
Yeah.
He was a Plymouth Argyle, and he was on he was in Singapore, and then all of a sudden he ended up in Sumatra. So,
Yeah.
and then I found out he was on Banker Island. So how he got to Banker Island, he's on one of the boats, but how do you find out which boat he is on?
Well,
You just
that's
can't.
yeah. As I say, that Michael Peth has done. That's the best. He's actually brilliant at
Yeah,
that.
I've
He's
had a
really
look
done
at
that. So,
yeah, I've
so
had a look. I've had a look at a lot of his roles,
Mhm.
but he isn't on any of them.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
it was pretty chaotic, I think, on the quay at Singapore. By just trying to evacuate. As I say, my father was the idea was to set up a workshop on Java. That was the initial idea, and they were putting men from the REOC onto the ships to go to Java, and of course they got sunk in the Bangka Strait. But there was also civilians trying to evacuate from Sumatra, and they got sunk in the Bangka Strait and ended up in Bangka Island and then over to Sumatra. So it was a pretty chaotic time, and to actually get
yeah.
make a perfect passenger list, it's very, very difficult. Very difficult.
Well, and again, you don't know if they were on a main ship or they just were in a lifeboat or something, because a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah,
them just got in a lifeboat, so you just don't know how they got there.
yeah. I mean,
Um,
the slightly bigger ships would have been travelling towards Java, but there were, like you say, there
yeah.
was people went in junks, lifeboats, rowing boats, but they mainly went straight across to Sumatra and tried to get across the island to Padang.
Yeah, one of them I had some years ago now, and I can't honestly find it. But I did put him in the Roll of Honor, but I can't remember his name and I can't find him. But he, they, there was three of them in a canoe, and they got to the south of Sumatra, so they travelled a long way,
Oh, yeah.
and one of them died on board the canoe. Of course, they didn't have any food, so one of them died on board the canoe, and they pushed him over, and then they got to that's right on the south end, and there's a big forest there, and he went through the forest and he found a little village, and then they reported him to the Japs, and of course he got captured. But there's three of them. One died on the canoe. One he got ashore, but he died. So he's only one left. But I can't think of his name, and I can't remember it now.
Yeah,
But I'd like to find that again because that was quite a nice story.
yeah.
Anyway,
There was
can you
there was
can you hear us now, Sophie?
Yeah,
Can you
I
hear?
had to shut my laptop down several
Yeah,
times, and
yeah,
then
that's
I
what I had
actually
to do.
uninstalled the software. I actually
Yeah,
uninstalled the software and reinstalled it.
yeah.
This is really frustrating. It
We're
wouldn't
saying
just work.
we'll have
So
to think about getting a better system because they alter it so much, Blue Jeans, and that is getting a
yeah,
bit of a pain.
yeah.
Anyway,
but
yeah,
I did mention last time, Ronnie, about maybe perhaps trying using something else like we use Microsoft Teams a lot for work. I don't know. I think that's
yeah,
free.
it's free,
As long
but
as you've got
I
an
did
Office
try
account.
that. But
Did you?
I think you've all got to have the same email uh, um, domain. You've got to use the same domain for your emails. If not, you can't use
Okay.
it because I did try that, um, and 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 they said
Yeah, because we use
you
it with.
can't use it because you've got to have the same domain. Although you have your first bit like Ron Taylor at blah blah blah, the blah 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 bit has got to be the same.
Okay,
That's what
because
they.
we use it
Yeah.
between companies and it's not a problem. So I don't.
Oh,
Yeah, I don't know.
yeah. Anyway, we'll have a
Yeah,
good
might be
look and
worth looking
see.
at again. Anyway, so
Yeah,
um,
yeah, um, yeah. Anything good happened to anyone? Come on.
Not really. No,
Not
just
really.
spending my life working away.
I've got
I've got another story to share, if that's okay.
Yeah, go on then.
Yep.
On Facebook last week, you may have seen a photo that I put on there of 3 escaped prisoners of war
Yeah.
in the company of
Yeah.
5 Thai gentlemen who were called buffs.
Mm.
And I found this photograph probably 2 or 3 years ago at Kew, and put it in the file that was to be looked at a later date. And the time arrived last week, and I thought I'll just see how far I can get with this, because it was a bit of a mystery. And within 3 or 4 days, I've got the full chapter and verse story from start to finish of who these guys were. And many of you will know Ken Hewitt. He's been the central character in finding the information, because he's done a lot of work on the Leicester Regiment. He's written the FIPO history of them, and he came across this story in some file, and he put it on one side and just cherry picked what he needed for his research. But he sent the whole file over to me with the details, because two of the escapees, the chaps with the pith helmets, they were from the Leicester Regiment, and the other guy was, I think he's from the Royal Army Medical Corps or Ordnance Corps, so the 2 Leicesters escaped together from Nong-Pladuk, and they, opportunists really, after the air raid in December 1944, the camp was total chaos, and they tagged on a party of prisoners being taken out of the camp to go to another area. So they tagged on at the back, and when they saw their chance, they scarpered. And they were lucky, because every village that they came across, they found friendly Thai people who fed them, gave them somewhere to sleep, and pointed them in the right direction. And in the end, they ended up in Kanchanaburi, of all places, in safe houses. Then they were taken down the river to Bangkok, and from Bangkok they ended up in Phuket, where the photograph was taken. Now that's a very, very condensed story of what actually happened, because I've got a daily diary of where they went, what they did, and so on. And I've summarised this, which I'm going to put on the Facebook page tomorrow, so we can, people can read the other story.
If you're going to put it on the page, Ray, I've got an escape page in the Roll of Honour. I can just add the names in there.
Yeah, I will.
And where they escaped from,
Yeah.
But most of the escapees, of course, died.
They did, yeah. But these 3 actually got out and ended up in Calcutta.
Yeah.
The other guy came from the Chumpon area, which is going south of in Thailand, almost opposite the southernmost border of Burma, in that sort of area, but on the other coast. And he was a batman to a Japanese commander or commandant, and he could speak Thai. And because he was a batman with a Japanese officer, he got privilege of going out of the camp quite often, and he got talking to local Thai people. He made a friend with a police sergeant who suggested, I can help you to escape. Well, it was a bit suspicious, but an opportunity arose when an air raid siren set off, and the Japanese commandant scarpered into the jungle, and Watmore was trying to keep up with him, when suddenly the police sergeant appeared, and he said, come with me. Well, that was in January 1945, and eventually he was put on a train with a load of other Thai people working for the railway, and he was taken up to Bangkok and taken to Phuket, where he met up with the other two. Sorry, so they made that's the third person on the photograph. The guy without the hat is the one from the south. And when they got to Calcutta, they were joined by a fourth escaped prisoner who was an Australian. And I don't know his story. I mean, that's the next challenge, isn't it, to find his story? Mm. But he was in a Bangkok hospital, suffering with some problem or other, about to be picked up by the three who were going on to Phuket, and he got suspicious of the plan, so he escaped again from the hospital. But I think with the help of the American OSS, he ended up in Calcutta and safety. So remarkable stories, and I'm so pleased that it got so much detail from just within 3 days of putting it on the website on Facebook. Sorry, amazing, really.
Yeah, that is funny though, isn't it, Ray? You have one little thing, and that often happens, doesn't it? You have somebody say something to you, and you start looking into it, and that just opens up a complete new bit.
Yeah.
And you say, which you haven't travelled in before, you haven't been there before.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was doing a page yesterday on a Maurice Maru, from Ambon, and I was doing the page, and I knew there was 650 Ambon who were being transported back to Java, and I knew 500 of them went on the Maurice Maru, and 150 of them went on another boat, and I could never find out the name of that boat. Actually, that was bombed, aircraft bombed it, the small boat with 150 on, and then the Maru came along and picked them up. So then it was overcrowded at the best of times. A lot of them had to be on deck. That's why a lot of them died. There's 360 odd died on the Maurice Maru. And that was just getting from Ambon back to Java. But I didn't know the name of the boat. And it's funny, I'd done the story for somebody, and they got back and said, well, he weren't on the Maurice Maru, he was on and that began with K. I've got it on the page, but he told me the name of the boat. And I've looked everywhere for it, and I could never find it. So how he got it, I just don't know. But at least now I've got the name of the boat.
Yeah.
But,
Ronnie, with that story, if it's okay with you, I'll do a detailed account of it, because obviously, you don't want to put too much on the Facebook page, and maybe you could upload it into the FIPO website somewhere.
Well, the Far Eastern Heroes.
Yeah.
That would be ideal for the Far Eastern Heroes.
Yeah.
I mean, if you write it out, Ray, and then I'll just add it in your story, of course, that would be under you. But I'll put it in the Far Eastern Heroes because that would be ideal for that.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't hear of many. I mean, we know the 6 Australians that escaped from Sandakan March, didn't we? We know they escaped. Otherwise, we wouldn't have known what went on. But you don't hear of many escapes. No, successful escapes.
In the reports that Ken sent to me, these guys are named, but they're given a number. And Brown is number E13, Smith E14, and Watmore E15. And it sounds like they escaped 13, escaped 14, and so they gave them some kind of tag that that they referred to, and maybe there's a story somewhere for E1 to 12. What happened to them?
That would be ideal for the Far Eastern Heroes.
Yeah.
Some of the stories on there are quite, they're all different. But I can't remember writing a lot of them, honestly, and I have to look in the search and then find something I've written. That's getting terrible. My memory is getting worse and worse. Anyway, we haven't had a long meeting, but it's been a good meeting. you know, what we've gone over has been quite good. So I'll stop the record there, okay? That's all.